Castell y Bere near Abandonment in Wales. Now this is a marvellous site for a castle, typically Welsh, and it's embedded in the stark landscape formed by Castell Idris and its mountainous cohorts. This once impregnable castle now lies ruined and isolated atop a steep-sided, flat-topped rock, but was perfectly situated to stand guard over the surrounding valley floor, which used to be covered by the sea, they say. The drive to this site seems to go on, and you begin to wonder if you took the wrong road. But the breathtaking spectacle of Castell Idris, the chair of Idris, makes it well worth the effort. Legends say Idris was said to be a giant, also a poet, astronomer, philosopher, who once used the mountain as his home, or his throne even. And Idris may have actually been a hero linked with King Arthur, who was killed in the battle by the Saxons around 630 AD. And legend also states that if you spend the night on the mountain, you'll wake the next morning either a poet or a fool. The castle was once a remote outpost on Prince Llywelyn's southern frontier. The last Prince of Wales, also known as Llywelyn the Great and Prince Gwynedd in the early 13th century. Llywelyn was King of Gwynedd in North Wales and eventually known as Prince of the Welsh around 1228, and he dominated Wales for 45 years. During his childhood, Gwynedd was ruled by two of his uncles who split the kingdom between them, and Llywelyn began a campaign to win power at an early age, and he was sole ruler of Gwynedd by 1200, and also making a treaty with King John of England that year. And his relations with King John remained good for the next 10 years, and he also married his daughter Joan in 1205. But around 1210 relations deteriorated, and John invaded Gwynedd in 1211, sometime around there. Llywelyn was forced to seek terms and to give up all lands east of the River Conway. But later Llywelyn allied himself with the barons, who forced John to sign the Magna Carta in 1215, and by 1216 he was a dominant power in Wales, and he maintained his position in Wales until his death in 1240, when he was succeeded by his son. Now, Castell y Bere was vital to his security. It guarded his cattle range, protected the homeland of Gwynedd on his southern frontier, and was virtually impregnable, as it used a natural topography very well. He might have been Prince of Wales, but the cattle were king. In medieval Wales, cattle were as good as currency. So this location was so important strategically that Llywelyn began building this impregnable castle. It was taken by English King Edward by siege in 1283, and that was after Llywelyn died. And King Edward made alterations to the castle and hoped an English frontier town would grow here, but it never happened, and it was abandoned by the English during the uprising against their rule in 1294. This picturesque and remote location once helped control an important routeway running up from the coast of Tywyn through the mountains towards Dolgellau. A distinctive and unusual feature for Welsh Castle is the elaborate defended entrance, with its ditches and 2 gate towers, each with its own drawbridge and possibly portcullis. Such a sophisticated entrance cannot be matched in any other Welsh castle, or even by the standards of English fortifications of the early 1220s. Most of the castle's strength can be attributed to the commanding location, but it's not one of Wales' most famous castles, nowhere near. Probably due to it being built by a native Welsh prince, as opposed to the Normans or Edward I. And after the persistently sloping walk up to the castle, the ancient stonework seems to jump out at you as you round the corner. And once inside the castle proper, you may become a bit confused. And you really need to get onto higher ground to read the outline of the site. It can be very confusing, as it follows the form of the rocky plateau on which it stands, so that its overall design is oblong, sort of triangular shape. The siting of the castle and the presence of several massive towers would have compensated for any lack of strength in the fairly poor constructed walls. And as you enter, you see the remains of one of the massive round towers, placed here to defend the castle's main entrance. And the castle's well in the area of the bailey is an unusual looking structure due to its size. It's massive. Apparently the well contained many archaeological treasures, but it's a curious structure. At the far end of the castle, it contains an unusual looking structure, a second large D-shaped tower. It's actually detached from the rest of the castle. It may have been added by Edward I when he seized the castle in the late 13th century, and was possibly used as a refuge and last line of defence during the siege. And the 10-foot thick walls of the tower may have been as tall as 3 or 4 stories. And as I mentioned, in the late 12th century, when the castle was finally surrendered to the English, the last castle to fall during Edward I's incursion into Wales to crush the rebellion of the Welsh. The English partially repaired the castle, and a settlement was established at the foot of the craggy hillock. Eventually the castle was rendered useless to the English, and the new English settlement was abandoned, and it was never used again. Interesting, Robert Plant and AC/DC's Brian Johnson met up and visited Castell y Bere to talk about life on the road. They were blown away by the surroundings. Robert Plant and Led Zeppelin had a long history with Wales. It goes back to his childhood. He would holiday in the country with his parents, and he's been interested in Celtic history for decades, which came out in his songs. And at the height of the fame, they began to write the third album, Led Zeppelin 3, and it was in a small cottage in Broniall, which is very close to Castell y Bere. If I remember, I'll add a link for anybody who's interested in watching it.